So citizen involvement through energy citizenship, mini-publics and beyond. Concepts, methods and Finnish case studies will be presented by Antti Silvast. Antti, you're an associate professor at the LUT University in Eastern Finland, and your research lies at the intersection of science and technology studies, energy infrastructure and interdisciplinary collaboration with a focus on risk, resilience and the everyday functioning of liberalized energy systems. I didn't understand half of what I just said, but you will luckily be explaining that to all of us. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the invitation. It's a really great pleasure to be here in this fantastic venue and having listened to really interesting presentations by Daniel, Marte and Christine in the morning. So my name is Antti Silvast. The title has already been read as well as my profile. I work in LUT, or LUT, LUT University of Technology. We also have a campus here and I'm talking on this long topic today. I will be relying quite a lot on our new project called Material Democracy, which is led by Aalto University, Samsa Hyysalo there, and it has partners from these universities whose logos are listed there. The project is funded by the Strategic Research Council in the Democracy of the Future program. We are not the only project funded there, but this is a program established to study the future of democracy and influence policy decision-making and corporations in these topics. Indeed, we are very fortunate to have a large number of stakeholders in the group, including Nordic Energy Research, Finnish Energy Authority, Motiva, several ministries, and so forth. There are almost 20 external stakeholders. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we are doing now. My ambitious talk, which I will now be very kind of keenly keeping in 20 minutes, although I will be speaking quite kind of peacefully. So let's see, I have to speed up the pace a little bit when we get to the afternoon. I know we are here after the lunch as well. Things that I say will be quite grand in many ways, maybe very big in the start, but I think we need that kind of discussion. Having kind of looked at the whole title of this event, having looked at the three presentations, the panel in the morning, I think we are discussing very important ideas here. Political science, social science, I'm a sociologist by training, ideas. What is social acceptance? What is opposition? What is participation? What is citizenship? What is democracy? We've been calling democracy out many times, but have we said anything about it yet? Is it easy to say anything about democracy? Of course not. I mean, it's a very complicated topic. I will open up these things. This will feel a bit like a lecture. I'm apologizing that maybe in advance, but it is a didactic purpose in the first part. I will do some effort to explain concepts, explain what they mean, explain what we mean when we say certain things. So that will be the first part. I will talk about Finland a little bit, about a few case studies. That will be quite brief because our project, Material Democracy, has been only going on for a year. It's a 6-year project. So we are now starting the empirical work, but we are still not doing most of it. I will talk about methods and methodologies, because this was also called in the morning, that we like to hear more about what are the methods, because the first part of the talk will be about introducing the concept and quite a lot of problematization of concepts as well. This is a warning. The second part will be about what is happening in Finland, what are we lacking, what are we not noticing, what kind of participation we are not doing, what are we doing, how do we understand these issues. The third part will be attempting to come to a constructive solution through methodology. What kind of better methodologies might we have, in addition to many methodologies we've already been hearing about. And I will focus on public participation methods and how we can map them out. And end a little bit more advertisement for the project. Very briefly about ourselves, I work in LUT University. My research group is called Technology, Sustainability and Societal Change, a name it got only a couple of days ago. Actually, it has currently 6 members. We are growing. We are hiring actually a couple of other people as well as we speak, and we are part of the LUT Social Sciences department. So LUT University, as an exceptional technical university, in Finland has its own social science department, which is actually 50 plus people at the moment and 300 students. It's gotten pretty large. It existed only for 3 years. We work in a technological university. We're supposed to be interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, to use Daniel's term, in the interface of technology, society, and the economy. So the name of the group also reflects that. But not more about the members as such. We also have several projects ongoing. I will be focusing a lot on the material democracy project. I will also be drawing some ideas from our Horizon project called Resilient Investment for Sustainable Environments. And since we are in a Nordic conference, I do want to kind of mention in a positive way that very happily we heard that Nordforsk has just funded our new project, Data Quality for Responsible AI in Energy Systems, led by the University of Copenhagen, but this has not started properly yet, so I won't talk more about that, but wanted to mention here. Okay, what do we do when we do participation in our research group? I'm going to say a few things. They are now bolded here. They might sound maybe a little bit everyday, maybe banal, but I'm trying to illustrate them in what follows. We are empirically interested in participation. We are interested in what gets actually done and how things work in practice. This is an interest that sounds very kind of self-evident, but often when we talk about acceptance, participation, engagement, we don't actually visit a lot of that, what happens in practice, especially like materially. As was kind of called out in one of the comments, energy is also a physical system. It is a material system. This puts certain limitations to participation, as well as the markets are very material, and we have a keen interest in materiality of the infrastructure when we study these things. Our agenda is very pragmatic. Of course, we handle democracy, participation, resilience, justice in other projects and related topics, but we always want to bring them back to practice. We are theoretically ambitious, but empirically rigorous. This was a slogan we talked about in our group meeting a couple of days ago. So of course we do theory, but we also are empirical and methodological. And in doing so, our argument is that current models of participation that we have in the energy field leave out a lot of situations, actions, and people. There are many stakeholders and kinds of actions that we are not capturing. I have some examples from the Finnish countryside in what follows. We have actually also share of population who doesn't vote. So if we think, if participation is voting, and I'm going to challenge that idea soon, well, then we are not capturing 100% of population with that. So we talk about people not involved in public issues, participation and democracy extended to those people who are not involved, for instance, in voting or public deliberation events or things like that, or mini publics. First, let's start with some concepts. So, what is acceptance? What is opposition? I don't need to visit this very long, because we have had so many presentations already about the topic. Acceptance is usually about what drives, explains acceptance. Opposition is divided into different levels or scales, communities, also political, market acceptance. This is drawn from an article by Mariana, who has probably already left, maybe, from my university, who posted one of the comments. I recommend reading the article on acceptance. What acceptance doesn't do, in my opinion, is it doesn't really kind of study on what actually happens. It doesn't study what works. It studies how people accept things, what explains it. But we need to do something about these things once we have that knowledge. And that's where the kind of research on public participation comes in. I wanted to take two very classic sources here. These are old sources. Arnstein's ladders are from the 1960s. Funk's cube is from 2006. So we are looking at 20 plus 40, 50-year-old sources at the moment. They bring out still some very relevant points. Archon Fang, it's a critique of Arnstein, extension of Arnstein's ladders, tells us in his excellent article kind of complex governance in public issues or something like that, that first of all, when we now we are talking a lot about democracy in this event, but we do not have one form of democracy even in the Nordic countries. We have several different versions and models of democracy and how it works. We are not living in the Athens city-state anymore. And that was like an example of a direct democracy, which was probably quite problematic in its own right. It wasn't very inclusive because you had to be an adult male person in order to vote in this democracy and have direct influence. But often with maybe some exceptions, we don't have that kind of democracy. There's no canonical form of direct participation. There are many different forms of participation. Arnstein in her 1960s books is still very useful against what Funk calls the untempered enthusiasm for participation. She points out that, participation, citizens have different kinds of agency when they participate. Sometimes they are only being manipulated. Sometimes there are exercises that are so-called therapeutic exercises. Sometimes they only receive information but cannot do anything about it. In the highest ladder, there's citizen control and citizen power, but that's the highest form of agencies that citizens can have when they participate in issues. I hear this latter still quite a lot in our project work, also in municipalities and things like that. It's quite well known. Arjun Fang starts to expand this model. And he expands it because he says that this is empirically correct. This is interesting empirically. If you're talking about a specific problem in a municipality that has problem with flooding, for instance, as in our Horizon project, well, you might want to ask, do you want citizens to have a control of the river, or do you want to just inform them what happens in the flooded river? I mean, this kind of empirically works. But Arnstein confuses it with normative kind of appraisals, that we should always go higher and higher up in the ladders. And of course, in many issues, this is not possible. Maybe not always even desirable. Before I go into the cube, I will kind of skip kind of most of the details of it because I'm now halfway in my presentation, as I told, so I have a lot to say. I would also remind us that the principal reason we are here, it's very important that we talk about participation, about public participation. But we shouldn't congratulate ourselves too much about the fact that we are here. We are talking about these things because they don't work. There is some kind of a failure to address things without involving participation, and that's why we talk about participation. They're institutionalized experts, like we all are, I would say, in this room. We couldn't have solved some problems. There's polarization, opposition, project being slowed down, and we need participation because of that. And then we need to understand. Fang's point, without going into the details of this model now, is that, well, participation has different designs. There's many different institutional designs for doing participation. There's question of who participates. Who is the participant? Is it the other experts? I mean, often actually when we say participation and stakeholder inclusion, we mean the stakeholders and not the citizens. We mean the other experts. This is very common in the government, for instance. Or is it the actual citizen? Second question is, how do they kind of communicate? How do they make decisions amongst each other? Are they just listening? Remember that many people also here, of course, we have the online system. We're just listening what's happening. We're not really participating. You might be silent in the whole event. Maybe we're just spectating what's happening. And we could ask if there's also a form of participation. I mean, it is a kind of, it's a participative event. And the third kind of axle is connection to action and public policy. We know the kind of critique that in public participation often nothing happens as a result, but this is also very, very common. Like there are kind of like usually when things like when the actors who have direct authority about energy issues are the companies and the kind of political decision makers. They have the kind of agency to do something about things. And citizens might not have that kind of agency. So the point we take from this democracy cube is that there are many different forms of participation. It's as simple as that. I'm going to start flesh out this a little bit. I'm not going to talk extensively about citizenship and energy democracy now, even though it was in my title. There's a lot of these terms now floating around. They are very generic in some ways. Energy citizenship is the idea that citizens, once they are informed, they become active. This has been also kind of quite clear in many of the presentations, that if we give localities more information, they will be more aware, they will start doing things differently. We might even name this as citizenship. Even in the stronger sense, we might talk about democracy, energy democracy, even though Oslo political scientist Kasper Strzelecki admits in his article that this is just the ideal political goal, to have energy democracy, because it requires ownership, wide participation, empowerment, autonomy. These are very good values. I really kind of stand behind them myself as well, but I would ask, using Fang, like how do we design something like this institutionally in practice? How do we attain so many different goals? So this is my kind of conceptual part. Now I move to some empirics in a shorter amount of time. I repeat what we just said. What is our interest? It is in these concepts, but even more on how things work. How do we study these things pragmatically? How do we extend to new stakeholders, new groups that might not be participating in the usual ways we see it? And I have some examples from case studies from Finland. They are very brief, but I will introduce them in the sufficient detail. We were called to do a Nordic perspective, so I would like to mention the Nordic Clean Energy Tracking Report. I hope I remember to close it correctly, the name from 2024, which we were discussing in Suomi Arena 6 months ago in an event organized by Nordic Council of Ministers and Nordic Energy Research, which usually does the comparison of the Nordic countries, like how far are in the energy transition. And if you look at in the macro aggregate level, Finland is doing quite well. We have increased the renewables by 14% in the last 10 years. our share of wind power has come from 1% to 17% in the energy mix, and fossil fuels from 30% to 10%. There are some success stories like Finnish heat pumps. Also Sweden has lots of heat pumps. The Nordic Clean Energy Tracking Report, Scenario Tracking Report says that the success is due to kind of good market design. But my colleague Samsa Hysalo, who has been studying this thing, says that the heat pumps are based on user innovation. It's an innovation coming from kind of bottom up. So there are kind of like participations happening, especially through internet forums. Apparently like a lot of discussion happen about heat pumps in the internet forum, and that's been very conducive to their kind of expansion because people have tailored them to be better than they are at the moment. But there are also other than success stories. Wind energy is very common in Finland now, as in Sweden. In the actually general level, the acceptance, I'll talk a little bit about acceptance as well. I have some data on that in next slides. In general level, it's like 82%. No, with solar, it's 82%. I think with wind, it's a bit lower. Accepts wind power. It's very high, but it's also very differentiated. It's actually differentiated along many axes. With regards to gender, education, political allegiance, and maybe even other ways that we might not know about yet. So if we take like an example of this survey data, we've been mentioning different countries' survey data, so I feel almost like we're going through all of these, like what can you find from different countries. Finnish energy studies these energy attitudes. It's been going on since the 1980s. I don't have any longitudinal data, but I got some more detailed data from them. You can probably ask them if you are interested. And these numbers, which I'll only visit briefly, do show that there are some kind of differences, so they might be a little bit surprising. This question is about, would you accept in the energy mix of the future that we have wind power? And the questions are increase significantly, increase slightly, currently adequate, decrease slightly, decrease significantly. I'm not properly statistician or quantitative methods expert. I might be doing something a little bit perhaps incorrect here. You can correct me later. But you do see some interesting things here, even like this kind of simple comparison. The gender differences based on stated gender are actually not very drastic. The currently adequate, a little bit more common for men than for women. Do not know, a little bit more common for women than for men. But then you see like education, and I can't explain this at the moment. I don't know what this is. If you have basic education or you have higher education, you are more supportive of wind power than if you have some middle level education. And I'm not sure what explains this, but there is this kind of difference. There's also, even though wind power is now very permeated in the Finnish society, it's very visible, it's discussed a lot. The political kind of party allegiances still explain things in this survey. Based on who would you vote now if there was elections. Center party is quite kind of neutral in this comparison. I've not taken all the political parties. Finland has more than 3 parties, of course, but I've taken only the main differences here. True Finns, the right-wing party, are markedly less in favor of increasing significantly wind power and more kind of in favor of decreasing the number. Social Democrats are more in favor of more wind power. But what I'd like to kind of point out here is the kind of 17 that you see there in the right. The people who do not vote are the most opposed to wind power. And now we get back to participation and democracy, because if we understand democracy as parliamentary democracy, clearly not, I mean, this is clearly a group that is not participating in parliamentary democracy because they are not voting. So what can we know about it? What can we know about these stakeholders who are not participating in that? Well, there are surveys. There are also qualitative surveys in connection to the climate and energy strategy. The so-called KAISU survey with very large respondent numbers asked rural residents, what would you make purchase? This is public, this is like research that's already being gathered. I think it sits in the ministry at the moment. What would you make you purchase a low-emission electric car? And the stories and the accounts that people give, I think, are quite interesting. The rubric here being that I took from Eva Heiskanen from University of Helsinki is that sometimes policymakers fail to recognize citizens' situations. This is about what they do. It's not only about their attitudes or beliefs or maybe even values. First respondent says, thank you, I'll be wrapping up towards the end, that is willing to take an electric car if the government donates the car. Work run is 70 kilometers, car costs 2,000 euros. and is he supposed to now buy a low-emission hybrid car with that? Second one says, when once used cars are available at a reasonable price, that is in about 10 to 15 years. There is, I mean, when it comes to car ownership, there is thinking among some people that you have to kind of, well, drive the old car you already have to its completion before you buy a new car. And there's a lot of sense in this kind of thinking if we think about sustainability. As soon as low emissions cars aren't sold as boxes, there are some emotional answers here as well. And the last one says, at the moment, nothing would get the person to buy an EV because it's economically impossible and cannot maintain a contraption that is full of electronics, also don't work in the Finnish climate without acting out. Here is a group of actors who clearly has quite a lot to say in this survey, but they are not participating necessarily with the usual means of the voting necessarily, of the kind of participating in deliberation events. So I would like to end, because I think I'm now supposed to be going towards the end in a couple of minutes, a little bit what we are going to do in the Material Democracy project. This work is now undergoing. If you have comments on it, I value it. We are doing designing the methodology, and are going to be underway next spring in the larger research team. So I'm going to skip a few things about deliberation, although I have a Danish example here about the Danish climate consensus conferences, which have, I think, changed quite a lot, and critical research by Maja Horst on it. You can find this from me later on if you're interested. But talking about material democracy, well, what can we do? Over the lunch break, we had a discussion about participation with one colleague and ended up saying that, of course, I mean, many of the methods we have do not really engage people enough. But what can we do differently other than the state? Well, one thing we are doing now, and which is not our own idea, it comes from the United Kingdom, is simply mapping out the different methods that exist with the premise, practical premise. So the premise here is that if we map out the different methods that exist and we ask what is the method producing, I think the actors in the field will hopefully need this kind of information. We have different methods. Some of them are dominant, some of them are emergent. There's very diversity of things. There's activism, protesting, public consultation, co-design, practices in home, cycling action group. I think this might be recycling or cycling action group. This is from Jason Chilvers, who is University of East Anglia, who is in our advisory board of the project. This mapping has been done in Norway and the United Kingdom already, and we are now doing it in Finland. So mapping out what different methods there are. There are some reports by the Jason Chilvers' group here on energy kind of use in homes and also in biodiversity. They've done similar mapping, and the results are these kind of maps. So as a result of this mapping exercise, you get this picture of the different kind of participation methods out there that are actually empirically used in certain cases. So you actually, to come to this kind of map, you do a lot of Google searches, you do academic searches, and you put somebody to work on it and produce this kind of a mapping, and then you present it to the stakeholders and you start discussing. Like, do you think one model is more dominant in what you are doing? Should we maybe have also these models in the right, which are not used? So it's a way of kind of introducing more reflectivity. Here's the biodiversity map. I won't visit that, but this is my last slide. Let me conclude a few things to just wrap up. So we have deliberative democracy, ideals of democracy. It emphasizes the participation and discussion among citizens. The starting point when we talk about democracy is often that voting is a good way to participate, but doesn't bring out all citizens' thoughts, experiences, and values. We need other methods. Deliberation is one of them. Mini-publics, I haven't said much about mini-publics, but they were in the middle of the Arts and Funks Cube. This kind of participation is actually a constitutional right in Finland and in the EU, as far as I know. So when we are talking about participation and being enthusiastic about it, of course, we are talking about something that needs to be done also legally. Citizens are offered different ways to participate in decision-making, and different methods do different things. This is what I conclude with. It sounds very trivial, but it's not. I mean, citizens, it's not clear if citizens are always heard in decision-making, or they would automatically improve by listening to the citizens. And that's why we need different methods, different stakeholders with different outcomes, and experiment with them and gather what's out there. That is the promise of our project, what we are doing next. Based on the critiques I had at the start, the empirical situation in Finland, and I would be lovely to hear any of your comments and questions on the presentation. Thanks for your patience. And here's our contact details and LinkedIn if you wish so.
Thanks, Antti. Perfect timing. Julia, I know that you have at least one question.
2 questions. So we can start with the first one. And feel free, if there's one slide you want to show again to answer the question, you're very welcome to do so. How do you define democracy in your research?
I'm doing exactly.
I figured.
Getting little help from here. Well, I was instructed to be thinking about these answers and not answer outside of my own expertise. So I'm going to be very direct in how we define democracy. This is something we debate a lot in the research group and in the broader material democracy project. Democracy is also in the name of our project and in the name of the whole kind of program of research by the Strategic Research Council. I would say that this is not an easy task to define what is democracy. And if we kind of did an exercise, which I think we should do, of everybody have to write down their version of democracy, even in the research group of people who are studying it, we will probably get 5 or 6 different definitions. For instance, but if I answer for myself, well, in some ways, if we follow kind of Fung's democracy cube, as it is called, well, he defines democracy as this kind of sets of institutional designs that can be divided in 3 different dimensions, and then you have different kind of outcomes based on this. Like there's different ways to do democratic governance along these 3 axes. Also, on a more personal level. We have talked a lot about localism in the presentations, and this is something that probably holds a lot true, that in addition to democracy having different definitions, different designs, people locally participating in issues and getting experience of participating about issues that they have practical experience on will increase democracy in its own right. That is probably the best I can do. We could have some minimal definition of democracy from Athens or something like that, but I won't repeat any of that kind of definition. No, yeah.
Thank you. And then moving on to the second question. How has the attitude towards wind power changed in Finland at the same time as wind power production has significantly increased?
This is interesting. Thank you for the question. The Finnish energy attitude surveys show in the kind of near future, this is not when it has increase has happened a bit before that. I think the support is slightly lower than it was before the Corona years. I don't know what explains it, but I am just creating a master's thesis. I supervised a master's thesis which look at this issue, how it has the attitude changed once wind power become more expanded. Well, I haven't finished the grading yet, but this work claims, because you can of course go very much back in time with these old attitude surveys, and Eurobarometer has a lot of data on wind power acceptance from the early 2000s, which is quite interesting. I think Eurobarometer also stopped asking these questions about wind power acceptance at some point, so we don't have endless amount. I mean, that's different. The question is set a bit different ways in the current times. But this thesis, and now this is thesis claims that empirically the things that we associate, the drivers we usually associate with acceptance, were very different when the wind power wasn't present, when people didn't have any experience of seeing it in the landscape and seeing it in their own kind of areas. And the claim there is in the thesis that now we have much more focus on these kind of benefits, local benefits. What does it mean in those kind of terms? What do I gain from having a wind plant in my town? Whereas before it was more general attitudes towards technology that were kind of driving the discussion. So that seems to be one difference, which seems to point out that once people get experience of technology, their attitudes changes. It's not only that the attitudes are completely removed from the technology in itself and the experience of that. Yeah.
Thank you. And we had a clarifying question also, not particularly for you, but in terms of the slides and whether they will be shared. And I checked with Mai, and the intention is to share all slides that we are available to share. So there's a lot of information here, and I'm sure it really sparked additional interest to look into it. But But that was all from Slido and from me. Thank you.
Kiitos.
Kiitos, thank you. I am going to give you a gift, but I'm going to ask you a question too, because you are the democracy expert here, and this is going to go high level.
Please go ahead.
How worried should we be about democracy? And the gift.
Don't know if this affects my answer. Well, I mean, of course, if we look at, I mean, there are these democracy indexes or indices that are being gathered, and we also read about these things in the news. We see the political situation, and I'm responding maybe now first partly as a citizen first, and as a researcher second. Yes, we should be worried about the kind of democracy as an ideal in practice, in how governments are operating around the world. And in order to kind of do that as researchers, I think our duty is to study democracy, debate the concept, open up what the concept means, even though it is, of course, an elusive concept. It is hard to define in any one way, but that's true of most concepts. I mean, you cannot define any concept in one way probably in this whole world. We need more empirical understanding, we need more methodologies, more conceptual discussion on democracy, and I think we shouldn't evade the topic. Not kind of say that, well, we are not dealing with this. And this, I think, extends to, in an interdisciplinary way, also to other disciplines than social sciences. As social and political sciences, okay, well, we always discuss this thing in our studies, and we know quite a lot about it. But in the kind of spirit of material democracy and material participation, democracy can also exist on the ground in very technical practices, in retrofitting your home. It's not often considered participation or democratic, but it can have big impact on the energy system. So I also think firms, energy companies, of course, I mean government agencies should also be interested in the question of democracy and be worried about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kiitos.